Hello, and welcome to the Down syndrome world. Today, we're talking about educating learners with Down syndrome in regular classroom setting, issues and challenges. I thought long and hard about talking to you about the issues related to educating learners with Down syndrome in the regular classroom setting because simply we have different perspectives from different parts of the world. Each country has its own setting of regulations, has its own setting of provisions, and certainly has its own setting of evaluation of to what extent the education experience of learners with Down syndrome became inclusive and most of all meaningful. When we look at the status, the current status of the issues related to supporting those involved in the process of inclusivity or inclusive education for people with Down syndrome, we found that we have several issues that we're dealing with. First of all, the international regulations. We found that although many countries not only signed but actually ratified the United Nations Conventions on the Rights of Persons with Disability, as we call it, UNRCPT, CRCPT, we found that many countries, while complying, they actually, when it comes to the nitty-gritty, when it comes to application of inclusivity in all stages of education, they face the challenges. So while we have the international setting telling us this is what should happen, every child with Down syndrome, included obviously among the big umbrella of children or learners with disabilities, as known here in the Emirates as people of determination, should have access to full inclusive education in regular classroom setting. That's in one hand. On another hand, we found that people are struggling and countries are struggling when it comes to inclusivity because simply there are issues that is not only reflected in the regulation, but on the ground, we have issues related to this. For example, the local education authorities in many countries take on the national policies that is reflected by the United Nations Conventions on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and actually develop their own frameworks in order to support the education experience of learners with Down syndrome. But when it comes to the ground, as I say, there are issues. Some countries, even here in the Emirates, for example, we have even the inspections framework actually supports the application of inclusive education for all learners with and without disability. And that, of course, includes learners with Down syndrome. But even in the inspection framework, there are challenges. Many people actually said that one of the main current scenarios of the current issue is the PD, the professional development for all involved to support the education experience of learners with Down syndrome. That includes all the way the shadow teacher, the classroom teacher, the Senko, now known as in the country here, known as the inclusion champion or the head of inclusion. In some other countries, we call them they refer to are the Senko, special education needs coordination. So all of this actually reflect a very, I wouldn't say confused the current status, very exciting and very positive, but not quite there. A status where actually learners with Down syndrome sometimes are hung between inclusivity, full meaningful inclusivity, and just being there in the classroom. Right. So the cultural experience. If we talk about the cultural experience and what does it have to do with whole this issue of inclusion for learners with Down syndrome in regular classroom setting, we find to start with even the definition itself actually creates a problem. For example, defining inclusivity, or what do we mean by inclusive education experience for learners, let alone learners with Down syndrome, all learners, we find that it varies from one country to another. So I always adopt one nice definition, which is all learners or children, regardless of special needs, are educated in the same class as their same age peers. That means the chronological age, with appropriate learning goals because all children can learn. So philosophically, if we take the notion that all children can learn, including children and learners with Down syndrome, then they should go to the regular classroom setting, right? Right. But on another note, we found the interpretation of this definition varies according to the cultural expectations. For example, in some countries, if you take a child with Down syndrome and put the child in a special classroom in a regular school, the country still refer to, or the local education authority still refers to this experience as inclusive education experience. It is not. It is basically, as we call it, a shed in the big school. You're shoving the child away in a corner. You are doing a covert exclusion. This is not meaningful experience. This is simply putting the child in isolation. It's just a matter of just taking him. Once he gets into the main door of the school, it means that the child is inclusive? Not really, because we are looking for what we call it a meaningful experience, not just an experience of the double door of the corridor, as they say, of walking into the school. So the definition actually causes itself a confusion, because simply inclusion means different things to different people. It means different things in different countries, even within local education authorities. So actually, it is very common to find, if a child with Down syndrome having an experience, say, in Dubai or in Abu Dhabi, it might actually vary from the experience of a child with Down syndrome in another Emirates in the same country, as well as the same happens in England, Wales, Scotland, Ireland, etc. In the US, I was talking to colleagues in the US to say that every state, although that they have one definition of inclusive education, but the interpretation of this definition means different provisions, which also reflect on the impact on the education experience for learners with Down syndrome. So the cultural expectations and the cultural notion of inclusivity vary. So taking the child in the bus and putting the child in a special classroom in a regular school is not really inclusive education. It's a provision, but it's a segregated setting within within what we call it a covert inclusive environment. Right. So the dynamics of the day-to-day operation of a meaningful inclusion experience for learner with Down syndrome actually must include four things. Must include the policy, the place, the practice, and the process. And in here, if I would like to just share a small video that actually supported this, basically very simple. In order for this card, let's imagine the inclusive education experience for all learners with and without disability will be a car. This car must have the four wheels in order to work. Any missing wheels will cause a problem. People even argue there is a fifth P, which is the practitioner itself. So in order for the car to move, we have to have all those four Ps. Any missing one will cause an issue. Unfortunately, although we have beautiful policies in some countries, we found that sometimes it is not really that meaningful experience after all, because the policy alone would not secure the place. If we have a policy and we have the place where we put the children included in a regular classroom setting, not segregated, but actually in the regular classroom setting, but not with the right support, as we say, with appropriate learning goals, we will have only a place. Babysitting service, I call it, but not a meaningful experience. If we have the policy, the place, and the process is not there, the actual flow chart that tells me what to do with the child, where is the individualized education plan? How are we monitoring the everyday progress of the child? Is the child happy? Is the child having a meaningful experience? Is the child included, meaningfully included? That means he's sharing everything, not just the music and the extracurricular activity or standing in the front of the classroom. To show that we're inclusive, the child is actually included. That will mean a good process. The practice, if we have the policy, the place, the process, but we do not have the practice that we needed, that include everything is to do with the meaningful experience of the child, assessment, examination, evaluation, talking to family, supporting the child in everyday lesson, in science lesson, in mathematics lesson, and also the well-being and the flourishing of the child while in school. Children should come to school to make friends and have good experience. All of this we refer to as the practice. So in order for this car to move, we have to have the four wheels. Unfortunately, in many countries, in many practices, we do not yet have all four wheels in place. And people argue that a fifth wheel is the practitioner, which I really would like to stop here and talk about it. If the teacher himself or herself does not believe that the child with Down syndrome is as important as anybody else in the classroom, not spoiled and not underlooked, it's actually a child like everybody. He has duties, towards the classroom, and at the same time, he has rights. Without having this belief, genuine belief among teachers, head teachers, caretakers, bus drivers, shadow teachers, if we have to refer to shadow teachers, SENCOs or heads of inclusion, if the whole school is not firmly believing as practitioners that this is a right, we will find that the child with Down syndrome will not have a meaningful experience. We have wonderful examples of children with Down syndrome simply flourish in proper, meaningful, inclusive setting. And we also sadly have hundreds of other examples where children being marginalized, tucked away, pull in, push out, in the name of inclusivity, have been really mocked about, as they say. And there are very, very bad examples of or I wouldn't say bad practice, but bad handling of the issue of inclusivity, and that is to do with the interpretation of what is a meaningful regular education for a child with disability. Last but not least, I really would like to end this slide by saying, without the four wheels in the car, we will never be able to actually support the inclusivity of a child. We have to have a car. For the car to move, it needs all the four wheels. Having a spare wheel in the boot is not going to really, it might be good, but it's not going to really make the car move. We have to have that. And I think unless teachers understand the harmonic, cohesive appreciation of all of this together, we will never be able to get that child to have a meaningful experience. Right. I look into the future here. So once we have all this, what is it that we're missing here? Well, we have a problem with categorization and diagnosis. Everybody is categorizing Down syndrome, a child with Down syndrome as Down syndrome, which is absolutely wrong. Children with Down syndrome are individuals. They have strengths, they have weaknesses, they have areas for improvement, and they have moods, and they have, as they say, they have all sorts of things that a human being would have. They are not all in one basket, as you know, just the DS, as we say, the D word. That's why I named my talk the D word, because unfortunately, once we see a person with Down syndrome, a set of expectations will come out right away, bite us in the head to put a cap, a ceiling on what is he able to do and what is he not able to do. And sadly, that actually creates a problem for children, for learners with Down syndrome and their families. I counsel parents all the time, and parents come to us and say that the teacher doesn't understand that my child is able to do anything. We do simple practice with teachers themselves to say, write 5 things a child with Down syndrome in your classroom is able to do. And teachers are gobsmacked. They say, really? Because they are always focused on what the child is not able to do, not what is the child able to do. Unfortunately, we have issues with expectations, categorization. Until today, people are categorizing Down syndrome as mild, moderate, severe, and very severe, which is not really a good way of inclusive education role. Because if we're starting by labeling people, they might be stuck in this label forever. What do you expect from a person who's been labeled since the age of 6 months all the way to the age of 18? How can I actually encourage this person to become a supportive, productive member of society if we keep labeling this person in a certain category? And people say, oh, my child was moderate, now he's mild. Actually, it's not about moderate or mild. It's not about red or blue. They are all colors. And I think it is very important to name people for who they are. This is John, Mariam, Ahmed, and Ali, rather than naming the disability or the category of issue. Of course, the diagnosis is an issue. We all know that, although, you know, I don't know if it's a positive side or maybe a bit of a bright side, one of the things that many parents with Down syndrome appreciate that the diagnosis come early, even sometimes while the child in the womb as a baby, as a fetus. And that supports the preparation of having or receiving a child with Down syndrome, which is great. But on another note, having to carry this diagnosis for life as a tag on the child, a label on the child, sometimes limits expectations from society. Schools are part of society. Lieberman argues that schools are frozen institutions. They are frozen in society. They basically reflect everything. If you want to change a nation, you need to change the education, right? So if this nation, any nation, believes that a child with Down syndrome is basically locked in his disabilities rather than abilities, the diagnosis is not going to help us in any way. As a matter of fact, it might be a burden, a liability rather than. So until we see the diagnosis something that is we can use in order to provide, we use diagnosis for provision, not for labeling. The right-based approach is something that it's a must here. It's, let's, you know, as I always say, let's move away from we should do this to we have to do this. It's a must. This child has every right to be next to his peer of the same age. Live with that, understand it, and apply it. Nations should be doing this. Transfer or interpret the policies that we have in our countries into practice by enabling all children, all learners with Down syndrome to have a meaningful education experience. Educating parents. I'm a researcher. I believe, you know, in research and research-based evidence. I found that educating parents about their rights not only supported the development of their children, but even supported the school. because many schools still, until now, despite the legislations, the framework, the inspection, the ratification of the United Nations conventions in many countries I'm aware of, they still think that having this is a gift. I'm doing this of my goodwill. I think I should have a child with Down syndrome. No, you shouldn't have a child with Down syndrome. You must have all children, including children with Down syndrome. So the whole notion of the all rather than them and us and them and X or Y. So I think, this is not, I try to balance out the aggressiveness of some of the parents trying to seek the rights and turn this into appreciation of their desperate need to acknowledge the needs and the rights of their children. Because unfortunately, I talk to parents and many of them say that they always accuse us of being aggressive when we say it's all right. It is all right. And, parents fought for years to make sure that children have access to education. Now we have the access. Let us work together to make this worthwhile, to make it a meaningful experience. I always ask parents to say that you need to have access to what is your child doing every day at school. Is it a babysitting service? Is it fun in the bus? Is he being used? Is he being manipulated? Or is he being supported? Because being supported is a whole another level, and parents should be educated about that. And last but not least, education. And then what? If we do not tier education in order to be a pathway for empowerment and employment, we are not really having any good education here. Because education should be leading to something. It is not about bragging to have a learner with Down syndrome who finishes high school and now what? We need to have it again. It's a whole road all the way to empowerment and employability. Without these two, we're not really creating a person who is able to be a productive member of society. And it is not again about giving them a gift. It is their right to be a productive member of society. A famous equation of the $1 to $7, as they say, every dollar or every dirham or every pound you spend your early intervention supported the development of a learner with disability and actually save you in future 7 of those units, whatever you spend, dirham, dollars, pound, rupiah, whatever. At the end of the day, early intervention, early education, support, inclusion, not really a matter of a cool thing anymore. It's a matter of economical empowerment for nation. These are, again, but they have the potential, these children have the potential to be productive members of society. So let it be, let us have a meaningful education. I would like always, I don't want to change this into a breaching opportunity, but I always say, unless everybody who is involved in the education of a child or a learner with Down syndrome believe in inclusive education for life, not just for here and for now, we will not have a meaningful experience. That includes everybody in the school, everybody at home. We have to appreciate the importance, not just the importance for my child, but the importance for the country, for siblings, for other people. When I empower a learner with Down syndrome by having a meaningful experience in education, I empower him for life. I save money. I empower him to become a productive member of society. I leave you with some thoughts to say that I'm so privileged to be part of the Down Syndrome Congress. I hope to see many events like this that support parents and teachers. And I pray and I wish for good, meaningful, inclusive education for all, not just for with or without Down syndrome, because until we believe that inclusive education is about the all, not just the member, it's not about him coming to us, it's about all of us learning together in a cohesive, meaningful, supportive, least restrictive environment. This is what inclusive education is all about, and I look forward to your question. Thank you.